we are going to go into in-game chat where we're going to talk to Eddie about his role in working animation. We got a lot of questions for you, man.
You ready, bro?
Are you ready for this?
Let's go.
All right. So I'm going to fire off some questions and we'll just like talk about it, have a conversation. Again, this is what the segment is. It's just having a conversation about your role and talking games. And that's pretty much it. So first question I have for you, man, is how did you get into animation? And at what point was your aha moment that like, this is what I want to do? I actually love animation and this is what I want. So
I always like to draw. I was always in art classes. I know VC had a program where like you can take multiple art classes and avoid other classes like language classes. So I just took every art class that Valley Central had because they let me do that.
Yeah.
And then I knew I wanted to do something with art because I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Parents' recommendations because they liked the sense of stability was maybe pursue architecture. And I went to, my sister was helping me tour colleges and went to the Savannah College of Art and Design, which is down in Georgia, because my grandma lived like an hour from it. And while we were touring it, we got a tour through the animation building, and I just saw an animated shark just swimming. I was just like, wait, like that, I can do that thing?
Like, wait, what?
Yeah, I was like, I think I want to change what I'm aiming to do. And then like looking at all the different schools and looking at New York schools, I think I just loved SCAD so much. And I'll pause there because like I wasn't able to afford SCAD. I went to the Air Force, and then because I went to the Air Force, I was able to afford coming back.
Wow, we're talking to a vet here, right? Freaking.
I mean, I wasn't in long, so I
you know, you're a man of many talents. You wear many hats.
Seriously,
Animator is a freaking Air Force.
I just wanted to get out of Orange County. I was like, I want to.
I feel like I hear that all the time.
Yeah. Everyone wants to leave.
It's very easy to get stuck there, so I was like, let me just do something else. So anyway, after getting out, I was able to afford SCAD. Did my whole 4 years SCAD there. Didn't feel like I was where I wanted to be skill-wise, and I did like an online animation program called Animation Mentor. I was like, yeah, this is working out. Like, I think at SCAD, I knew I sucked, and I was like, I don't know if I could actually pursue this as a career. But once I did the online school, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, no, this is achievable.
For me, I got it.
And the whole time, my dad's like, oh, I'm getting a little worried. You haven't found a job yet. But yeah, I did that, and eventually got at Monolith Studios to work on Shadow of War, which is a sequel to Shadow of Mordor.
Oh, shit. Really?
Yeah, that was my first gig in the industry.
Wow. And when you got that gig, were you like unbelievably pumped? Like, what did you do, backflips? Were you just like, was that like the one, like, I did it, like, I'm here?
So I went, after Animation Mentor, I believe it was like a year and a half without a job. And the pressure is definitely there because SCAD student loans are like hovering over my back at this point. And so they offered me a gig where it wasn't to be an animator traditionally as people would think, where you're like animating like attacks and stuff like that. It was to like work out a system that dealt with like mocap and automating mocap to like just run through a system to read people's like mocap footage and automate it into animation and not necessarily animating it myself. So I was like not the most thrilled about that, but I was like, yeah, sure. Like I'll take a job. I need it. I'm dying right now.
100%.
But there was also the balance of like, this is a AAA studio that I got to go into, and I knew Shadow of Mordor did so well. I hadn't played it, but I knew like for the interview that I should. So like the weekend before the interview, I binged Shadow of Mordor, and I like never played a game as much as I played that in that moment.
What'd you think of it?
I loved it. It was
right.
great. The problem with me was that like a lot of my gameplay history came from like playing MMOs, so it was easy to just like, oh look, Eddie just played WoW for so many years of his life, or Final Fantasy Online.
Right.
But then I played it. I was like, yeah, this is great. Like I don't know why I didn't do it sooner. So then I got the interview, and they asked me questions about it, and thank God I played the game because they were quite specific to that. But then I got the job, and it was an experience in and of itself, which at this point in time, I'm working with not realizing what soon to be would be Critical Role cast members. Like Liam O'Brien was a mocap actor in there. He did Gollum as well as some orcs, I believe. Matt Mercer was an orc. Laura Bailey comes on as an elf later on. Travis Willingham comes on as one of the human.
Wow, that is wild that you were working with him before this was even a thing, before Vox Machina was a thing. So that's crazy.
Yeah, so like I'm dealing with like their facial mocap footage. I think I met Troy Baker and got to like rapport with him on like what I was getting for like my work, and that was cool. I was at the
Jeez.
time he asked me like, "Are you getting everything you needed?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is great." But
See, yeah,
like
yeah,
there's definitely things I could have asked for that could have been improved, but I was just
yeah.
too stoked to be meeting them.
That was my question where I was gonna say, did you meet any of the cast members? So you kind of answered that a little bit,
Yeah,
but can you
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit more?
so like the cast members are obviously working out of LA, and I was up in Seattle. That's where Monolith is. And so Troy Baker flying up there was like the only time I got to meet them. At the time, there was a lot of talk about like maybe we'll get you down there to like help navigate the shoots town, organize what's happening. Uh, just to be more specific on what I did, we were getting all the facial recordings, and we were teaching the system to be like, oh, this is Travis's face. When he talks, he moves his mouth like this, and these are what his A, E, I, O, U's look like. And so it would learn Travis's face. And so there were things, it was a new system that was being developed there. Uh, so there were things that were like, we were hitting bumps like, oh, Travis grew a beard today. So now it's thinking this is a new person. So this is Travis so too.
Oh gosh.
So there was talk about sending me down there to like meet them, and I was stoked about that, but it was slow to happening. And by the time this was starting to come more too, I was wanting to get back more into like actual animating, and the this a year and 6 months after that was when the opportunity came up to leave them, and I was like, great, I got my like 1 year at a AAA studio. That was fun, but not exactly what I want to do.
Mhm.
And then I moved on over to a studio called Steamroller Studios in Florida, which I'm in Florida right now. And they were a startup studio who was just freelancing animation gigs out, and I got to do a lot of stuff there. Tomb Raider was one of the small things I did. I got to work on Robot 2.0, which I don't know if you know the movie Robot.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
it was a Bollywood film where it's all levels of absurdity happening in it, and we had a ton of fun working on that because it was just crazy.
So
Um,
Steamroll is where you got it's Steamroller or Steamroll?
Steamroller,
So Steamroller.
Steamroller.
So
yeah,
that's where you got the bulk of like your experience, you would say,
yeah.
right? Yeah, okay.
Primarily on the game called Dauntless, which is like a Monster Hunter style game. I had an amazing supervisor named Josiah Messingill, and I'm still like great friends with him to this day. Like I still hang out with him. I don't work there anymore. Um, he taught me a lot on that project. And Dauntless is a game that's owned by Phoenix Labs, but we were, because I guess the relationship with Steamroller and Phoenix Labs when they met early on, the relationship was that Steamroller would be Phoenix Labs animation house. We would do all their like creature animation, and I think we got into emotes eventually. But it was very like creative driven, which was awesome. We got to pitch our own ideas for what would happen. There's even like a shot that like I got done seeing. I think it was the first Avengers Infinity War. And like when Thor arrives and he slams his axe on the ground, I'm like, I want to do that for like an attack. Can I do something like that?
Yeah.
And like they let us do that. And
That's
Oh,
something
that's
like
so
that
awesome.
came
awesome.
out, but it wasn't exactly. It had to evolve because these are creatures and it's not Thor and it's not an axe.
So
Um,
it sounds like for in a job, like we were talking about the Perfect Dark,
yeah.
right? It's like people leave because they don't get that creative freedom.
Yes.
And you're telling me right now, like you love that job because it gave you the creative freedom to do like stuff like that. We're like, oh, what about this? So that's just
Exactly.
funny that like it's tying into this conversation that we were just talking about before.
Yeah, I mean, like, I got paid more at Monolith than I got paid at Steamroller. I went from a AAA studio to a startup studio. I took a pay cut to do that because I wanted to do what I wanted to do more. And so, like, you'll see stories like at Blizzard where like some big head leaves or whatever, and people are like, "Oh, sinking ship." That's not necessarily the case. Like, if someone's there for a long time, they could have just been like, "All right, like, I want to do something for me
They
now."
might have level
Right.
capped. They might have
Yeah,
level
Exactly.
yeah,
capped at that
Exactly.
place, and they're
yeah,
like, you know what? Like, it's not that I don't like this place. I just monotonous for me, and there's nothing left for
yeah.
me to learn. So
Exactly.
let me go somewhere else where I can
Mhm.
go into the next stage, right?
Yeah,
I've done all I
Essentially.
can for this
yeah,
studio. Now it's time to do something for myself
yeah.
or give my talent to somebody else.
Yeah. Or like you'll reach a situation where like, oh, I always dreamed of working at this one studio like Blizzard, and you'll get there and you like did it. Cool, I did it. Now I want to like
Now
I'm
what?
realizing as an artist what like makes me happy. What do I want to pursue? And so my move to Steamroller was that like I don't think I want to do this at Monolith. Great, like I love that like I got to be a part of this and work on a Lord of the Rings franchise, which is awesome. And then I moved over to Steamroller, and like now I get to work on my animation skills and level that up because that's what I want to work on. And it's still happening to this day. Like I'm working at Titmouse and I'm doing these awesome shots, doing like creatures and big CG things on like Legends of Vox Machina. But I'm also like taking classes now working on my human animation and bipeds because I feel like I want to improve on that. And you have like a balance of like what do you want to do with your career and what do you want to do as an artist, and there's just this constant like rebalancing that's going to happen back and forth there. Um, so yeah.
Now, Rob, real quick. So I want to get into the nitty gritty of like the technical director part. Like
Mhm.
you're considered a technical director, right?
Yeah,
And this is at Titmouse, is that correct?
that's correct.
What is that? Like, what? First of
So,
all, first of all, what?
Yeah,
First of all, the
so
name of your company
yeah.
is interesting
Hey,
to
mom
say
and
the
dad, I
least.
got this new job at the studio called this.
I was typing that
What?
name out on the doc here, and I was just
Yeah,
like, Titmouse. Okay, all
yeah,
right, that's new. That's
yeah.
interesting.
So, like, first of all, talk about as much as you can. Talk about the company that you work with, and you did a little bit, but mostly your role. What does a technical director essentially do?
So I think it got labeled the way it did because of the nature of like 2D show pipelines, I believe, because there's like looking at the whole animation guild and stuff. This is named this for 2D shows typically, but from a 3D perspective, and this is why like my LinkedIn will say something different. I'm more of a CG director where I'm overseeing the CG assets that come in and how they're managed and what they're needed for and how this can talk to 2D, which I don't necessarily know. I need a 2D, and we'll talk to each other like, well, I need to work like this, and you need to work like that. So we'll just create it like this, and that's what's happened. Like neither of us knew how to work with the other until we talked to each other and we managed it. So I was freelancing with them at first, just doing animation, and they realized that as those who watch the show at the end of the season, there are CG dragons, and they knew that there were going to be CG assets to that degree.
Mhm.
And if you're familiar with the Critical Role franchise, those dragons play a big role for quite a while.
Yeah,
So they knew this couldn't just be a freelance thing. Like we needed someone who could give all their attention to this and just manage it. Because at the time, our art director Arthur Loftus was managing that and his 2D team, which was a lot for him. And seeing what he does now, I'm like, yeah, I don't know how you were balancing this because I'm balancing this by myself, and it's a lot. Um, so yeah, I just came in, and they already had there was an artist who was freelancing for them that was doing their modeling, and I knew him from college, and I came on, and just being able to work with him and everyone else was his friends, it became a nice little knit of CG people who were freelancing. And so talking to them has become easy. It's just friends talking to friends at this point. We make our ask when we need them, and we work with their freelance schedule and when they can do it and deliver it for us. But it'll range anywhere from like modeling a box to doing a full character. I know, like on Twitter, like we did CG assets of the main cast just to help with like scene prep with how it'll look and how where they'll be positioned and stuff. Um, so it's ranged to a lot of things from modeling assets to animating things to just doing previs work with cameras. It's a lot. It's
yeah,
a kind of a CG generalist.
it freaking sounds like a lot. Like,
Yeah.
um, now being a technical director, right? What's the hardest thing about your role, or what's the most challenging thing about the role?
Honestly, it's speaking to the departments that I'm not most experienced with. So, as you heard, I have a full history of animation in my career, and they're like, "Hey, now come talk to everything else." What I depended on there was what I knew out of college because I knew starter introduction to all these other departments like texturing, rigging, and modeling. Um, I don't know how to do those things. So the hardest part is relying on the freelancers and learning from them to be able to speak to it as much as I can and advocate for them as much as I can when they can't talk about it. And a lot of it is just being able to just admit, I don't know how to do this. I need to go talk to them. I need time to go talk to them to figure out, deviate a plan of how we can approach this. And we'll do meetings, and we'll have our art director there and our supervising director, Sungin, um, to just discuss what 2D needs, and the 3D freelancers say what they need, and then I'll just mediate the conversation of like, here's what we can do, and here's the middle ground we can hit for this. So definitely speaking to departments I don't know how to do is the hardest part.
I think that's awesome that you're able to see from inside view where you're communicating in all aspects in all different departments, right? So
Yeah,
you're able to build that groundwork and say, okay, I need help with this. I don't know how to do this. You have this set of skills that I need. Let's help each other out to help, make this project
yeah,
come alive, basically, right? And
yeah,
I think that's really cool because I don't know if a lot of people see that from the outside, right? A lot
yeah,
of
no,
people that watch the show or play games, they just see what's in front of them, right? They don't
yeah,
know the difficulties that's kind of developers and animators all had to go through to get to this point, right?
yeah,
And you telling us all these things and all these different type of communication skills and different type of like meetings that you have to go to, that really shows how much goes into building, a game or a show or anything, a project in general.
yeah. I mean, the most obvious thing about the show is it's a 2D show, so the question will come up like, why are the dragons CG? Like, why weren't they just 2D too? And then that raises the like people will learn. I think they did a good job during the live watches that they did like on Tuesdays during the airing of the show. But like drawing a dragon with as much detail as these guys have over and over again, there is going to be a consistency. It's going to be too difficult. The pace at which TV moves is just too hard. Whereas with CG, it's very front loaded. We made the CG assets in the beginning, and then for the rest of the season, we have them. We don't need to worry about redrawing them, making sure they're on model, making sure the colors are matching or anything like that. They just exist. So that's the benefit of having that. It's really expensive in the beginning, but it will save
Pays
lives
off.
of artists who are drawing every
Yeah.
single frame of this dragon over and over again.
So for those of you drawing or animating a dragon is a pain in the ass. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, animating creatures, whether 2D or 3D, is just hard in general. Um, the benefit I had with animating these dragons is like we freelanced artists who I worked creatures with on Dauntless. Like I was just like, hey guys, I need your help. I've already led you before. I know you're going to be easy to work with. Let's do this. And some of them being critters themselves helped out because they were willing to work their job and freelance because they loved the show. A lot of them, it was just fun to just reunite and just work together. But yeah, creatures are hard, whether 2D or 3D, and you tend to just lean on who you know can do it well and in time to just get it done.
I noticed there were some other, like, not just dragons, right? Like, I think,
Yeah,
like, episode 5 or 6, there was, a part where, and obviously there's no spoilers in this
yeah,
episode, but, there was a part where they were using a wagon, right, of
yep,
some sort, and that was also, animated CG.
yeah.
So
Vehicles
those
are another
vehicles
thing.
are also, animated as well, I
Yeah,
noticed.
because if it's like a from solid object, it's going to be moving around. You're going to be multiple perspectives of it. It can be easier to just do that. I know that there were horses in it. I guess I should say from my experience at the beginning when I was freelancing for season one, I was doing like there were wolves, and then there was like an alpha wolf who opens his mouth
Yeah, I
and
remember that.
he rips in half. And
Yeah,
the
that was so sick.
That was really
That was
cool.
like
yeah,
I was like, oh my
it was
goodness,
so
yeah.
gnarly how they did that. But they were realizing like we have this two-legged dog. How are we going to make this like run? And they were at the time they're using an overseas studio who does a lot of 2D animation. They were worried for them having to figure that out. And so I got hired on purely in the beginning when they told me I'd be working on Critical Role. I'm like, cool. And they're like, all right, you're going to be animating a zombie dog who walks with his tongue. Not exactly what I thought Critical Role would lead to. But
But
I
like
got to
as like a
just
Sign me
watcher,
up,
you don't
chief.
think of that, right? You don't even think
no,
of like the work that goes behind it. Like you're just watching, you're just like it's just happening, right? But
yeah,
Yeah.
like you'd be like, how the fuck am I gonna make that? Like
yeah,
how
and also some pretext of that, like I've never animated that before, so I had to figure that out too.
Well,
Um,
where can I find a
you
two-legged
can add
dog that
that to the
has
resume at least now.
yeah. So I freelanced that, and they liked working with me. So then they're like, "All right, well, now we need to do an army," which also, by the way, is really hard to do in 2D because every single character is a character that's drawn, whereas in CG we can copy paste. So like we just came up with a bunch of skeleton like cycles that looped. Play with making variant cycles and then mirror them to make like double the number of cycles you get, and then pepper them around in the scene. That way you don't have to worry about 2D animating every single one. We literally
Yeah.
just copy paste animations, get different angles on it. So it just saves money. Armies, large creatures, vehicles that are just like solid and seen from multiple angles, all are things that are just money saved if you do it in CG.
I remember seeing these. I don't know what to call them. I don't remember the name of the creature, but they were like the Dementor looking things. They're like these
Oh,
demons that like they didn't like the
Had
fire.
Yeah, they
yeah,
had
yeah,
blood coming down
Yeah,
their face
those
and
were
all that.
sick. Though
Those are
that
yeah.
really cool.
yeah. So did you
Real
animate
cool.
those?
No, that's all 2D. That's great
That's all.
work by them. They put
That's
all.
all two. That was all 2D.
Yeah, so
Yeah, that was
that's actually a case where there's a lot of detail in them that would kill animators, but they were willing to work really hard to get those guys to look right. It started off 2D and they just kept pushing and pushing because it needed to look gnarly enough to sell the feeling they were going for. And I think they achieved it.
oh yeah,
Yeah, no, they
100%.
were fantastic. I thought those
Yeah,
were some of the coolest bad guys in the show and within
yeah,
the
For
show.
sure.
yeah,
So,
they're gnarly.
so now we're gonna kind of shift here. We're gonna
Mm-hmm.
shift into. We're gonna talk about Vox Machina in a second,
Mm-hmm.
but as far as like working on animation or working on video games versus working on an animated series,
Mm-hmm.
what are the biggest differences there? Like what are the challenges? Like which one's easier than the other? I guess I would say.
I think that hmm, it depends. So like there's cinematic animating and then there's video game animating, and video game animating everything needs to look good from every angle. There's no faking anything that you can cheat from like camera perspective. So when you're like looking at this animation, you're play blasting, which is like our way of getting video footage of our animation. You're play blasting it from like every angle, left, right, three-quarter, top, back. Everything needs to look good and real. And then when you come to creatures, like making sure you maintain the balance from all those angles is in itself a task, and you really need to learn how to like deal with anatomy properly. When it comes to uh, cinematic stuff, where it's like something from a camera angle, you can cheat a lot as long as it looks good from there. And so we then split where it's like then there's TV cinematic and then there's film. Like film animating is gonna you're gonna get a lot of time to make sure that looks good and that camera is gonna look amazing. When it comes to TV, you got to work fast. That's the hardest part about the show is the pace that I've had to animate CG, and also like I have a quality bar that I want to hit for these creatures because I don't want the CG to look like CG does in every 2D show where it's like,
Right,
Yeah.
right. It's
uh,
passable. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I want to make sure that nobody's like getting taken out of it for that moment.
Right.
And I wasn't in this role for a lot of season one, but I was for season two. And so that's what coming in, that's the thing I wanted to hit. But the benefit of again, going back to the camera is you can play with how perspective works with the camera. We were able to cheat things. There are going to be things where like you see like moving camera shots when in reality it's just staying still, like, and everything else is moving in the background to make it look like it's
Mm.
moving in space. But if we were doing video games, it needs to fly over. It needs to travel.
It needs
Like
to actually move. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and we need to make sure it looks good from every angle while it's traveling. But and the other benefit is at least with this show, we had amazing board artists, which is like where you get like animatics of 2D drawing of what needs to happen before it actually gets animated. And so that lays out like a great roadmap for us to just follow the idea. Whereas with games, it's like from scratch. We know he needs to do an attack. Give us an attack that accomplishes this. And so you're kind of just figuring it out as you go. And you'll shoot reference of yourself acting like a creature. And like, will this work? And they're like, well, we need him to arrive at this space by this time. You're like, well, I can't do this attack by there. Maybe I need to figure out something else. And so there's much more discovery happening in games than I think there were on the show. We knew what we wanted to achieve on the show. We knew what the shots were asking for and what they needed to accomplish. So it was much more straightforward. And so I like working on shows more. The pace of it is really hard, but I think it only made me a better animator because of it.
And how long did it take you to complete your task for
Uh,
this?
so at least everyone knows season two is in development because it was paid for by Amazon when season one was announced as well. The pace that I'm supposed to move at is 3 shots a week, which is a lot considering I think in games, one shot I would get like 2 to 3 weeks to work on. So
Really?
yeah, I'm working at what's that 9 times the pace
Oh my
for TV.
goodness.
Which I took my knowledge from games and like learning how to animate cycles to help save time in this. Where like okay, like we knew that worked, let's just copy paste it and just use it to build from there. It'll be a nice like starting point. and then go from there. But yeah, the pace that we try to move is like 3 shots a week for these, which from what I've been told overseas, technically it's a lot faster than that. So I'm still getting like a good amount of time for what TV is expected to do.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't have to like go into specific detail about this process because I know there's a lot of moving parts. But
Mhm.
how does Titmouse, Critical Role, Amazon Studios, and product or production rev all come together? Like, can you explain that process to me as far as like, okay, well, we have the voice actors, we have the animators, we have Amazon Studios. What does the handoff look like? And can you walk me through that process?
Yeah, I think I can talk more to what happens like on the art side. I know that there's things that happen in terms of like voice recording and stuff that I don't have vision on to know, or like Amazon approval and stuff like that. But um, I know what typically happens is the I believe the main people that they meet with are like they'll meet with Travis, Sam, Brandon, who they're like we call them the BTS, Brandon, Travis, Sam, but it's
Mm-hmm.
we'll meet with them, and Sandra will meet with them and take the board artists, and they'll figure out. Well, I think writing comes in first, and they'll figure out the script that generally should happen, and then the board artists come in, and that's where I enter the picture. But the board artists will illustrate what they imagine is happening there with what kind of camera angle should be happening. Um, and they'll get what is essentially an animatic. They call it boards, but an animatic is like a playthrough of all the boards just timed out. And then like voice recording will get put on top of that. And sometimes there'll be like temp sound where you'll hear like Sam pretending to be a character that he's not for a time period, which is funny when you're hearing it. Um, but yeah, so that animatic will exist, and the sound will exist over it with like the dialogue that needs to be there. And then 3D comes in at that point. We kind of split where that gets handed off to all different departments. And so for 3D, we'll just take a list of like, all right, what things in here are expected to be 3D? How many shots are they in? Let's take a count. How many artists do we need for that? Um, are the CG assets made already? Do we need to start from scratch? And then that's where it's like if we use the example of, oh, like we need this box that can eat people. We need to model the box. We need to texture it to make it look like it has color and all the strappings to make it match the show style. And then we'll get a rigger who will like put a skeleton into the model, and then the animators come in and they'll animate it. So that's a really slimmed down version of
Yeah,
what
we
CG
can
would
go on
be.
for hours about the actual
Yeah,
process itself, but yeah, just a kind of like a Spark Notes version of. Is Spark Notes still a thing? Is that it?
You know what? I think so. I think, yeah, because I was in a meeting yesterday, and
Can't
one
wait.
of the uh, one of the there was like a lady there talking. I think she was a nurse, and she mentioned Spark Notes, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I use Spark Notes." I'm like, "Huh? Didn't know that was a thing. I forgot that was still a thing." So yeah,
Um, yeah, and I just want to point out, like throughout this podcast, I've seen Kelvin's head explode, like inside, like
you have no
just like
fucking idea,
I
dude.
just see it, just like.
I mean, I show it with my facial expression. I'm just like, holy shit! Like, what the like? Everything you're telling me is just like it's just so much great information. So I love it. But
yeah, man, there's a lot. But yeah, so going back to once the CGS is made, then we like animate the shots, and so using the boards as like a guide of what needs to happen, what lines need to be said by what like CG things, if there are any CG things talking, um, and the animators will go at it. I'll grab my guys and we'll go. Okay, we'll do bids. How long are these shots going to take? How long do we need? Well, the episode needs to be done by this time. All right, how much can we slim that down? How much time are we allotting people to do this? Or do we just add more animators to help compensate for how much needs to be done? Um, and that's the CG side of things. There's a whole department for like painting backgrounds, painting character design team for drawing a character for every single character that shows up, even if they're only there for one moment, which is like crazy the amount of time. Like you can math out like this artist it costs this artist this much time to make this one character that's there for 5 seconds. And you're like Jesus Christ.
jeez,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the thing is like people don't realize how much is
Mhm.
involved when it comes to animated series and like anime. there's
Yeah.
just so much happening at like
Mhm.
quick times, and it's way different than actual like real life film and stuff like that, because
Yeah.
that's I don't want to say it's easier, but it is easier, right, in a sense, because like the thing's there, like it's there, and I can do this thing because it's functional. Where it's like no, it's not. They can do it, but I have to make it do it.
Yeah.
Like I have to actually and give it to life, and that's extreme. Like that's what you're doing. You're essentially taking this this drawing and you're bringing it to life, and that is I
It's
can't even
not an easy
fathom.
task
Yeah,
for sure.
No,
I mean,
not at
like
all.
you were mentioning, Robin, I know they weren't animated, but the skeletons, right, that had the bleeding faces and all that, like, though regardless if they were animated or
Oh,
not,
they're
those
2D
took
animated?
2D animated. Yeah,
Yeah.
those took a lot of time and effort, and you can show
Yeah.
and you can tell, like, the way they move, the even the facial expression that they were showing, like, when they were, like, screaming at you, and those
Mhm.
are they take a long time, and
Mhm.
it pays off, though, in the end, because those scenes like that are, like, one of the highlights of the show, right?
Yeah. Every time you get a moment where the characters aren't just standing still talking to each other, like, that time and money is going into that, like, even the talking and staying still, I don't wanna undersell it, that's obviously taking so much time, but, like, the amount of work that people do in such a short amount of time, I don't think people realize that, like, more you guys will watch this show in like a month or something like that, but years are being put into this just so you can have that. And
that
so
that
like there's kind of a you will watch an episode and be like that was amazing, I can't wait to get the next one, but we're looking at that going look at
yes,
all of this we
All this work.
created.
Yes, yes, 100%, and that goes back to games as well, right?
Yeah.
We talked about Project, Perfect Dark, right? Where
Hmm.
they're going through turmoil right now, right?
Hmm.
And all the stuff that we don't know behind the scenes, but when that game comes out, and if it turns out to be a really fantastic game, like, those people that worked on that game spent hours,
Hmm.
days, years just working on this game. We beat the game in, like, 12 hours, 14 hours. I'm like, "Alright, cool, what's next?" Right? But,
Hmm.
like, think of Elden Ring, for example, right? Like, all the little small details that we just kind of blow past and we don't even think about.
Hmm.
Someone was literally there for hours, days,
Yeah.
possibly months just working on that small detail.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just blow past it, sometimes
Yep.
we acknowledge it, but we don't really take or give them enough credit for it, you know what I mean?
right. Like Eddie's playing a game and he's seeing like an anime, like just like
Yeah.
a bunny moving around. It's just like that took 2 hours to animate that motherfucker. The
Yeah.
ears, fuck those ears, because
Yeah, yeah.
I would say like I think it's things like was it Breath of the Wild, like how their like grass looks.
Yeah.
Like
yep.
no one's stopping to go like, oh look at this grass enough to for the guy who did that to be like, I worked so hard
Well,
on making that.
to be fair, Elden Ring has some nice grass, at least when it's blowing, like, when you see the wind
You said
blowing,
wind
I'm like,
blowing.
Yeah.
"Damn, this shit is fucking nice." Like, like, salute to you guys, but, like, that was nice. But, like, little things, like, I see a fucking rabbit run around past me
Hmm.
or a deer, I'm just like, "Fuck you, deer, like, get out of my way," or, like, just stab it and just run away, you know what I mean? Like, but I
Yep.
don't think about, like, the animation that it took or the time that it took for that animation to actually, like, just
Yeah.
go across, across the field or whatever.
There were animations on Dauntless where it's like what the creatures are doing when you're not engaged with them, and like we'll put so much time into putting this life and personality in them, but like you don't see it, and if you do see it, it's when you're really far away from them, and as soon as
Right,
you get
right.
close to like engage, and then yeah, you're like I worked so hard on something that no one's getting a chance to look
But
at.
it's like little details
Pay
like
attention.
Yeah.
that but some people will notice that. They'll be like,
Yeah.
"Wow,
Yeah.
that's actually a really." And reviewers, like really good reviewers, will
Mhm.
pay attention to those small details and put in the review. Like little things
Yeah.
like that add to the experience. I
Yeah.
think I saw a video this past week of Red Dead Redemption 2,
Oh yeah.
and there was a guy, he was just like on his horse, like just walking, and you see in the distance there's this hawk that goes around and just gets a fish from the pond and flies away, and it you don't get
Yeah.
anything from that.
Yeah.
Like that was nothing, but it was
No.
such a cool detail. I'm like, holy shit. But
Yeah.
like how much time went into that animating that
Mhm.
freaking hawk grabbing that thing at that time, you
That
know?
Uh,
maybe 10% of people, if that, would see that, you know what I mean?
mhm. And this is where like I could gush hours about Red Dead and their willingness to slow down the player just to let the animation breathe. And
Yes, yeah.
but in terms of those things, it's like a thousand paper cuts of a lot of good little things will just it'll just feel you'll be able to breathe it, and it's
Mhm.
awesome.
Sure. So on to Vox Machina.
Mhm.
I don't know if you're allowed to say who's your favorite character, but who's your favorite character on the show?
Oh, I'm definitely. I have a bias, and I started this Twitter conversation where I think the dragons are nothing but sweet baby angels, and they are about to do
But
nothing
there's
wrong.
Sweet baby angels. Okay.
They have points to what they feel,
Did
and
you
I
watch the
think
first episode? I don't know, man.
yeah. No, he
I
didn't watch the episodes. He doesn't watch them.
I think that it's gonna. I think that people just need to hear them out. But
Okay. All right.
that comes from my point of like I hearing they were talking about the dragons were coming, and that's what really sold me to coming on the project because the only thing I've ever wanted to animate was dragons, and
Mm,
so like I was like, yeah, I'm on. So easily, like I love them. But if we're talking about the cast, I think that they made there's a tie between Pike and Keyleth.
mm,
I think that the live stream was a live stream, just like people fucking around. But I think Ashley wasn't around a lot, and they did her character so much justice by covering what was happening when she wasn't with the group and
right.
adding like a really like good meaning as to what's happening, like her whole like, conflict with the Everlight,
Right.
and it drove her to leave. Her overcoming that or advancement on that conflict allowed her to come and astral project in, which was just like, sure, Ashley can play this day, and she's in New York. Yeah, let's just astral project in. Sure, let's do that. Now there's like a reason for that, and then she's just a fucking badass, just
Oh my
sliding down
god.
on a shield
Oh
and like
Fucking
yeah.
fighting a
badass.
guy. Like,
That part, I was just like, oh my goodness, just
So, it is part of the reason why Pike wasn't involved in this show as much was because of, Ashley's schedule, is that
yeah,
or was that intended to begin with?
well, no, Ashley's scheduled with. She was doing work in New York to film. I think a show called Blind Spot. And so she would just, okay, I got to go back to New York, and I'll be back another time. I guess in gaps between shoots. So she couldn't be there sometimes, and sometimes she could. And so now that they're writing as to why Pike wasn't there, makes it like loyal to the show, but also providing like a nice reason as to why she wasn't there. That works with it, and that
and
I
as
really
a
like how they
viewer, you
resolved
have
that.
no idea. You have no idea that
Yeah, no,
that was going on.
no.
Yeah.
So
And then
But
with Keyleth, she's a fucking badass too. Like,
yeah, she's
and I think she's one of the most humanizing characters. As like, I don't know if it's maybe more to me being unsure of yourself and like getting people to believe in you eventually
Mhm.
is like that. That's awesome that they did that for her. That's great.
Yeah, both those characters feel like to me that they have this deeper power that they don't know that they have,
Hmm.
right? And it takes them throughout the episodes or throughout the story for them to realize like I offer more to this team than than what meets the eye or than
Yeah,
what I believed. You know what I
right.
yeah,
mean?
mhm,
Especially with Caliph, right? Caliph
yeah.
is it?
Keyleth. Mhm.
Caliph. And so that was probably that's why I like her a lot as a character because
Mhm.
she in the beginning when you first meet her she's very like not unsure of of herself. She's not sure if
Mhm.
she can like really support her team, right? But then
Yeah,
towards the end, you start seeing like her flourish, right? You start
yeah,
seeing her actually like s- become who she is, you know. So
yeah,
I did like her as a character. For me, though, I think it's a tie. I do like Pike. I think Pike was awesome, and
yeah.
especially I love Ashley because I just like her previous roles in games like The Last of Us and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But I really did like Percy as a character
Ah,
because
yeah.
he's just
Really? Okay.
yeah, I think his background and his backstory, especially I think in episode 6, where you start seeing like what happened in his past, right?
Hmm.
That made me understand him more as a character, and his character development like spiked up for me way higher,
Hmm.
especially knowing like something in his past is still I don't want to spoil it, but something is still there for him in his
Hmm.
past.
Right,
And
right.
so I was like, okay, that took a twist for me that I didn't expect.
Yeah.
And also his inner demons, I guess you want to say, right?
Hmm.
Where he's very he has like that um persona, I guess you want to call it, where he kind of turns into this dark
Yeah.
um
Puts the mask on.
yeah, he
Right,
puts
right,
the
right.
mask on and stuff, and then it just adds a layer to his character that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, Percy was great, and I'm glad that they were able to do such justice to his like conflict too. With the, you don't get a lot of his fight with his inner demons in the live stream quite as well because it's the
Right.
game and you're just talking about it. But when they visually showed him with that conflict, that was awesome.
Well, here's the thing about like Dungeons and Dragons, right? And I don't think we've played together, Eddie. Were you in
No, we
our
did not.
campaign? No, you went in the campaign after I did. Yeah, you were in the campaign after our campaign. Um, but like you go through the time and you're putting through your character's backstory, right? And
Yeah.
you're hoping that the dungeon master will like touch upon that backstory at one point. Like when at that moment you're like,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh,
let's
it's
go, right?
me.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel like a lot of the times it either takes too long to get to that point,
Mm,
or it does they don't touch it at all. So it feels like you do that backstory for nothing, and it takes out the engagement. I
mm,
love what they did with this show because
mhm.
they actually dive deep into these characters' backstories. Obviously,
Yeah.
we don't know much about the other characters right now, but I'm sure
Mhm.
they're going to touch upon those in the next the next season and stuff like that. But I
Oh, totally.
love that they went deep into Percy's backstory. That was fantastic.
Yeah, everyone gets their due, and it's cool to be able to experience it in a way that's different than what we already did, which is I think something that Sam said he was excited about. Like, we've already told that story. Let's tell it a little bit differently this time. So yeah, it's dope.
I'm mad you guys didn't say Scallon. I love
Really?
Scallon.
So like,
I
how could
because
you not say
every
Scanlan or Grog? Is it's so hard to not say them, right?
it's just every time they're on screen, you have a
Oh, yeah,
smile
you
on your
have to
face.
laugh. You have
You
to
Yeah,
laugh.
laugh no matter what. So I
yeah.
think that is just you can't beat that. Like if
No,
he's on screen, like he's gonna say something dumb or ridiculous, and he
yeah.
delivers every single time.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's
And
another fantastic, character in this.
the opening credits made him also look badass, like on the
Oh my
hand and stuff. I was
god.
like, oh Jesus Christ, man!
Yeah.
You guys made gnomes look so cool.
Dude,
They've
I was watching an episode, I think it was, I don't know what episode I was watching, but I was watching this episode and my son just
oh
casually
no,
comes in.
oh
I
no,
know, it's bad.
oh
It's bad.
Yeah.
no.
My son just casually walks in and he's like, "Oh, what's that?" So he starts looking and he starts watching. I'm like, "Oh, they're just fighting and stuff, whatever." And there's a part where he goes back into like he's talking about like one of the baddest badass moments that he's had. He's fought like a enemy or something, and
Oh
it
yeah.
was not the appropriate time for that.
Mm-mm.
I hit that turn off button so quick, dude. It was bad. I was like, I'm such a terrible
Dad,
father.
what is he doing? What is this little man doing?
What's that? What's that? I was like, don't worry about it, son.
When do I
Yeah.
get one of those?
Keep watching Blippy, please. Just keep watching Blippy.
I have family members who want to be supportive, and they hear I'm working this project, and it's 2D animated, and they go, "Oh yeah, it's a cartoon. Like we should totally watch this with the
Not a cartoon.
kids."
Well,
And the number of them
eh.
like in this one thread on like Facebook talking about how, "Oh yeah, I thought this was for kids, and I had to turn off that power button so quickly."
Yeah, just the
Yeah,
first episode too. It's just like, oh,
yeah.
okay, well, this is
It
where
sets
we're
the
going.
tone.
Yeah, it sets the
You know
tone
what
real
to
quick.
expect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll have to jump.
but I loved it. It's great. It's great.
Me
Mhm.
and my girlfriend were watching it, and it was at that bar scene, and then like all that's happened. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that's all right. Um, yeah, I mean, the thing about Grog though is his character model
Mhm.
reminds me so much of Kratos from God of War. It's like so crazy, and like he's just a big, strong dude. And
Yeah.
when he's like nice and he's like very like he's very lovable and stuff. I'm like, it's almost disorienting to me. I'm like, oh,
It's great.
that's
It's really nice.
yeah. That's like this is Chris if he was nice. You know what I mean? Like if
Yeah.
he was a big teddy
Yeah,
bear.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah, Grog was a favorite for me too. I think there was an advantage, and I think they brought this up into the show a bit, but there were moments where Travis forgets that his character's dumb, and he says something like smart, and then they all go, "What's that, Grog?" And then he goes, "What?" They brought that in the show, I think, one or two times.
I
And
have to
it's,
look out for it. That's
yeah,
awesome.
Speaking of little things, that were brought up in the show, did you? I mean, I'm sure you knew, but like Logic was in
yeah,
the show,
yeah.
uh,
Uh,
like first episode or second episode.
I don't remember which one he was in. My
He was a
experience with it.
palace guard, right? I think, right?
Oh, is
It
that what
must
it
have been
was?
like the second episode, I think.
Yeah.
But like I saw the cast list before I saw what they were doing. I was like, we are stacked.
We're
Like,
set.
I mean, it hasn't come out for season 2 yet, but the cast list for season 2, I was just like, what?
Yeah.
Dad, I need to tell you all these people that are working on the show that I'm working on. It's crazy. Like, I don't, I guess it's just like a hat tip to the cast and crew,
Yeah.
like, and the people that they're friends with. It's awesome that they got them.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, Critical Role, those guys over there, they made Dungeons and Dragons cool, right? Like
Yeah,
that's what it is. Like before you would hear Dungeons and Dragons, you'd be like,
yeah. There was
"Oh,
a
nerds, freaking want to."
stigma on it.
Right. Whereas like now you hear everyone be like, "I want to try Dungeons and Dragons," and I'm
Yeah,
like, "Do you want to though? It's pretty involved, you know."
yeah,
But Kelvin,
I don't think I would ever go past that because I'm not a Dungeons and Dragons guy, but I think what really makes me enjoy these casts, these characters, is the adaptations that they do with shows like this,
yeah.
right? We talk about League of Legends a lot, right, Rob? And
Hmm.
how I've never really been a fan of League of Legends, but then when I watched Arcane, that grabbed me so fast. Like I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, this show is phenomenal.
Yep.
And it even made me to the point where I bought the RPG game. I forget the name of it, God Rob. What is it
Ruin
called?
King.
Rune King.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ruin King, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, like, but that's what they do, you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
that this did the same thing for me, where I'm like not a huge Dungeons and Dragons guy, but like the characters, the cast,
Yeah.
everything about this show, it really speaks to me for sure.
But that's the entry point for you, right? So
It
now
is.
that you watch the show, you might go watch Critical Role stuff on
Right,
YouTube,
right.
right?
And I
Or
may
do a
and
one
I may
shot.
not.
Do a
Yeah.
3D
Exactly.
one shot.
Yeah, right. And I may not, but the point is that they've opened my mind. They opened
Yeah.
my eyes to something like this, you know, and it could very well open someone else's eyes and like, you know what, let me try this game out and see how it is.
And not to go like too full circle, but I think that's a little bit what's happening with Elden Ring, where it's like the more these people are trying it and the more they're exploring it, people are going, maybe I would like that, and just opening that door is constantly open door, open door, open door. Next thing you know, you're at however many buy or sales that Elden Ring was at.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But again, not to circle back, but the ring, Elden Ring.
Oh my god!
Damn.
Wow,
Got it.
wow.
So Eddie, anyways, I so not to go into too much detail. Obviously, you can't talk about everything here, but what you know the cast for season 2 already. You know somewhat of what to expect. Can you tell us anything as far as what are we able to expect for season 2? Obviously, bigger, better. Like what can we
More
as fans
epic.
expect?
Yeah.
I think like yeah, there was this kept happening with season one where they're like, oh, Travis kept posting like the episodes are up, like, yeah, it keeps getting better. It keeps getting better. Like by the end, he's like, I never lied. Like it keep getting better. I think that still applies. Um, I on the art side, we're like, we have to do what? Oh, okay.
There we go. We got our answer. We got
Yeah.
our answer right there. So
So yeah, I think it's that. It's just gonna keep going like that.
we need you to do half of a dragon. Cut,
Yeah,
and he's
and he
on his
walks
tongue.
with his head and just balances on his head.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll shoot reference and try to figure out how to do that too.
Yeah. I'll find a dragon real quick.
Oh, well, that's
I'll
my
be right back.
resume. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah.
Well, guys, I think that concludes our episode here. Eddie, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast.
Yeah, man, it's been a long time coming, and again, thank you so much for coming in and just giving your expertise, your knowledge to everybody, and just kind of sharing what it is to be an animator and just kind of seeing what your life kind of entails on a day to day basis. You know.
Yeah, man. Just all that, and then throw a 3-year-old in there, and
Yeah, yeah, right.
everything's smooth sailing.
Before we leave though, real quick, last question for us here.
Mhm.
What advice can you give anybody if they're trying to pursue this same career, the same like anything into animation? What can you give them as far as advice goes?
I think it's a bit of a two-piece of advice. It's going to be a bit of like know yourself enough to know your flaws and like your failings, and be aware of them, because when you pursue art, it's going to get hard, and you need to know your flaws and have them in check. Maybe come to terms with them. Maybe accept that like I might not be an animator who will get to Pixar, but is that necessarily bad? No, like maybe I just want to enjoy what I'm doing, and that's okay too. So know yourself, and I would say fight for what you want. Uh, it's a competitive field, so I don't mean go punch anybody, but I went a year without work. Technically, if you count when I graduated college, I went 3 years after college without work, and I knew my work wasn't good enough So I kept working at it. I kept taking classes. When money ran out after the online school, I kept working at it. Just fight. You got to keep fighting because there are plenty of people who are fighting more than you are, and they're getting the work.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
Wow, I feel inspired. I'm gonna go be
I got you.
Sorry, Kel, but I gotta stop doing this. I'm gonna go
Yeah,
pursue being an animator and
you're done.
take
All
out
right.
a
Yeah,
bunch
I
of
hear you,
student
man.
loans and then go in the Air Force. So
Yeah,
that's the plan.
that's the only way it can work.
Thank you everyone for listening to this to the Gaming Duo podcast. You can find us every Friday at 7 a.m. on every major streaming platform. If you guys want to be a guest on the show, please just send us a DM. We have our website out right now at gamingduopod.com. Just send us a message and we'll get you on here. Blake just like to talk games. Eddie, same thing goes for you. If you ever want to be a guest again on this show, just to talk about games, just hit us up.
Just come right in. Yeah.
We just shoot the shit here.
Let's
That's all
do
we
it.
do. All right. Guys, thank you so much. Eddie, thank you again for being on, and definitely excited for what's to come next out of the show. So,
Yeah.
Kelv, I'll catch you next week.
All right, guys. See ya.
See ya.
Bye.